Seeing as at the time that I'm recording this, I've um, reached 42 subscribers, I feel like some commemoration is in order. 42 being, I suppose, the answer to life's questions. Some of these questions I've actually tackled on this channel um, in the past year or so. Because on top of um, this channel having recently reached 42 subscribers, um, it's also getting dangerously close to its 1 year anniversary. So I guess to all of you who, stuck with me through this journey, I don't know what you're here for, witnessing this dumpster fire, but I appreciate you. And before I get into the content of today's video, I just want to share a little word from our sponsor. Geraldine's Hourglass is unlimited, who makes hourglasses and sells them. And I don't know, it's like as the sand falls, you kind of know how much time has elapsed since. So, Geraldine's Hourglass uh, Unlimited. Buy their stuff. Use the promo code Essence225 for a chance to have your contributions matched by your employer. And thanks, because I guess without my sponsors, I couldn't be here right now. Anyway, I can't sleep. So like a year ago, I was having some issues. Like right about the time that I started posting videos to this channel, I was having some serious issues. And in this video, I'm going to do a little. This was originally supposed to be like a video essay of Yale Dr. O's, um, you know, novel Ragtime, which I read like about a year ago. I kind of enjoyed. I don't know. I'm making this video. It's not really scripted, and I don't really know if I'm going to go in the direction of making a video essay about the book, or if I'm going to just talk about the origins of this channel. I've already hit the record button, and I'm still trying to make up my mind. I haven't lost you yet. Like, this book has literally, I guess, altered the course of my life. And like I don't want to be like glib or flippant or anything like that. But like it's largely shaped who I've become in the past year. So for context, about a year ago, I was working on a writing project that I was, writing. This came about kind of in the early months, the early stages of, my master's program, which I don't know. I kind of started the master's program in the last week of, I guess, my undergraduate degree. I don't know why I'm going into my biography. Oh yeah, that's where I was going with this. So this was still pretty fresh. I was pretty freshly graduated from my, bachelor's program. I was in the workforce, working a, 40-hour work week, a full-time job with, a living salary and stuff. I was only a few months into my career, the career that I'd be working at for, the next 30, 35, 40 years of my life. And I was just thinking just deep into this, I guess, depression, this kind of mingled with this existential dread. People say, a few years ago, I took like a road trip to, Fargo, North Dakota, and somebody told me that if I'd been to Fargo, you could stand in Fargo and look across the whole state of North Dakota right from there. Um, so basically, essentially, if you've seen Fargo, you've seen the whole state because it's a flat state, it's flat land. And essentially, within a few months of my career, getting not really out of college, but at least finishing up my first degree and, starting a job, it felt like the whole trajectory of my life was just like I had just entered Fargo, I just entered North Dakota, um, and I could just look upon the rest of my life and think, oh, this is going to be the next 40 years of my existence. That achievement, that first degree that you got, first degree that I got, like, yeah, that maybe gave you a little bit of an emotional high for like, half a week, but then you were right back into the grind. And you know what? The glamour has faded, the glitter is gone, and here you are. And you know what? It just, I began to believe that it's like no achievement, even like, finishing my grad school eventually, like next year. Like even that's gonna maybe give you a week, or like it's maybe gonna give me like a week or so of, I guess, excitement, relief that it's over, and then you're just gonna finish on in, the next, 29 or however long you're in this career for. And like, don't get me wrong, I was grateful to be like working full time, to be making like a living salary and stuff. But it sort of felt like an arrival. Like I've arrived at this thing that I've worked so hard to achieve, and like that's it. So like people would say like, oh, you should be really grateful, count your blessings. You've got a job, you've got, you know, you make good money, and it's just I felt like that kind of fundamentally missed the point. It was like fundamentally like beyond the point, and I didn't really realize at first like why I was sinking so deep into, I guess, just this pit of despair in spite of everything. And so I started I don't know, I kind of turned to, I guess, um, writing fiction, like I guess as a means of like a creative outlet, I suppose you could say. Because like everybody needs like healthy outlets for, I guess, all of their woes. And so like every time I get into like some sort of a creative writing project, I always end up, I guess, reading a lot, okay? Um, just kind of exploring like, has anything similar to what I'm doing, has it already been written, And so it was kind of through this writing project that I was like first introduced to the novel Ragtime, and that's why I read it. And I really found a lot of, Mother's younger brother, his whole character arc resonated with me a lot. Um, in some ways, like more than I care to admit. Because like in many ways, like when I first when I was first like reading it, like he struck me as sort of like a comedic relief character, like a little bit of a loser, I guess you could say. Because we could say like a simp, you know. I guess he saw himself as a hopeless romantic, and I know I just I first saw him as like kind of pathetic, a pathetic incel sort of guy. And I don't want to be too hard on him because, ultimately I ended up like seeing his story as less of, I don't know, I guess, just comedy, something to laugh at, some loser that you could just laugh at, and saw his whole character arc as more of a tragedy. Where am I going with this? I need to go, I need to go to bed. I still think, he has a stable job, but I guess he's just at the stage in his life when he's figuring that, um, he's starting to realize that he's, I guess, what the kids today would call like an NPC, just living in New York City, circa like 1904, I guess, in close like geographic proximity to all of this history, Emma Goldman and, Harry Houdini, and just all this history that's unfolding, and it's just forcing him to come to grips with the fact that he's, I guess, a nobody, that he has like a boring existence. I don't know. It's like when I started to read this, that's when it really started, I guess, click, I guess, why I was feeling so depressed. Maybe it's just this discrepancy between, I guess, the sort of egocentric, narcissistic, like overblown sense of self-importance that I guess I have compared to the life that I actually found myself in. Um, just coming to grips with the fact that I was, kind of contrary to everything that you think of yourself, as you're getting your, undergraduate degree, thinking like, oh, you'll change the world, you'll be somebody. And then, like, within just a few weeks of getting to the end of that, settling into a career, just feeling like, you're just like a typical, like, totally irrelevant, like, member of, I guess, the bourgeoisie. It's ultimately like what drove Mother's younger brother in the book, um, I guess, to everything he became involved in. To the social justice, to I guess the racial justice, to I guess teaming up with Coalhouse Walker Jr., destroying like H.P. Morgan's property. I'm not gonna spoil. I'm not gonna talk about the book that much. I might do a later video where I do an actual video essay of the book. I'm like 10 minutes into this video and I've decided the video is not going to be a video essay on ragtime. I may do a video essay later, but um, I'm just not really prepared for that right now. I need to reread it and I guess brush up on it a little bit. This video is mainly just to talk about, I guess, why it resonated with me as much as it did, and even to the point when like I started to get into like calisthenics, and there came a time like a year ago when I was reading the book, and I saw so much of myself, in Mother's younger brother, that I needed to just put it down and stop reading because it just became too emotionally intense. Like honestly, to get my mind off of it, to just help me focus on my work, and to not become so occupied with this book, I had to actually put it down for like a little while. And I got into calisthenics. I started going out late at night, you know, running to some remote place, and just then working out in the middle of nowhere. Ran to the point of just feeling this sense of like oxygen deprivation. Literally felt like I worked out to the point of feeling like intoxicated. I mean, yeah, generally this is like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And sure enough, I do eventually, like a little while later, I get back into the book. And oddly enough, it's exactly the same thing. The character is doing exactly what I'm doing to get his mind off of his troubles. Um, exactly the things that I'm doing. To the point of, I guess the overall effect that this had, the overall effect that the calisthenics had on me, is just, I don't know, making me feel, I guess, generally happier at work. Um, just being more outgoing, being more social. Um, I guess just feeling more invested while I'm at work. And then after hours, I guess just completely crashing and the depression is all back. Um, and just experiencing these huge emotional swings. Um, Again, also eerily paralleling, I guess, what's happening in the novel. And so, within like the story, like within his character arc, what he ends up doing is, just going downtown, going into the city, enjoying the nightlife, going to these, you know, bars and saloons, doing all of that, like illicit activity. And so, I found myself doing, I don't know, kind of taking his lead, driving downtown, driving into like, the deep part of the city, just kind of dabbling in, I guess, underground, like speakeasy culture that exists. Just got to the point I'm at this cigar bar that's open till like 2:30 a.m. So I went there a couple of times, really to just be a part of, I guess, the atmosphere. Kind of where I started to get into like, Chomsky and, Kropotkin, and but I would just bring like books there to read. Um, wouldn't really get much out of the books. I guess the music's too loud. The atmosphere is too, I guess, overstimulating. But yeah, still. Would just, yeah, kind of camp out in a corner, maybe camp out on the rooftop, grab a cigar, light up a pipe, you know, get a glass of something. I don't know. Guess it's just sort of become a part of everything that I felt was going on. Just to feel like I was a part of the nightlife. Um, I guess to hear the loud jazz music playing, to, um, I guess, just sort of out of my peripheral vision, I guess, see things going on, see people meeting other people, and yeah, sort of just, then afterward, of course, just, I guess, wandering the streets, like, alone until, like, 3 o'clock in the morning. Just became really hooked on the whole experience, to be quite honest. And this is all even coming, like, before the whole, I guess, learning that, I guess, my preferred, like, bar that I went to was allegedly, it had, like, a sketchy history, and there were, like, people who had been murdered there, in its, like, long past, and, allegedly their spirits still occupied the building. Um, again, I'm not gonna go into whether or not I think that's true because it's kind of beside the point. I mean, just the fact that I don't know, all of a sudden I just became intrigued by the whole thing. I didn't really care with whether or not it was true. Um, I went on the ghost tours. I guess learned as much as I could, um, and eventually just on the ghost tour ended up potentially contacting something with dowsing rods. I don't know. It just and again like all I'm really concerned with is that in the moment it felt completely genuine. Um, so the experience was real, at the very least. And that really got me like even further entrenched in the whole world. And I guess ultimately because it made me feel, I guess, a sense of relevance. I felt like if something, I guess, from beyond the veil, if something, you know, was willing to contact me, I guess from the realm of the dead, whatever that is, like that seemed extremely, I guess, reaffirming, validating. And so I ended up like spending a lot of money and booking the room, um, I guess the upper room, the penthouse suite, I guess where I guess the most infamous murder is said to have taken place. Um, and really, like as I am down at the bar waiting to go up, they said I could go up at like 11:30 p.m. Um, I'm just there at the bar and I drink way, way too much, and that's like kind of the only time in my life I've ever been like that plastered. Like ever since then, like I don't know. I'm not like a teetotaler or anything. Like I still like enjoy like a drink from time to time. But I guess I've had a relatively low tolerance for alcohol. I guess just because of the low key I guess trauma of that night. When I really drank so much that I went upstairs, passed out on the floor, and didn't really encounter any of I guess the supernatural that I had hoped to encounter. Um, it's just a really confusing period of life. And it was just drowning in the consumption and the excess and the decadence of the whole thing. Or I guess wanting to go deeper. Um, would just fantasize like in the middle of the day of just quitting my job, quitting everything, driving to like Los Angeles and putting on like my best suit and I guess just waltzing in the middle of the night to I guess like Sondheim's like a little night music, the opening overture, putting like flowers on like Evelyn Nesbit's grave and I don't know, I guess just performing, I guess unrestrained without reservations, going on like a vaudeville circuit, um, doing this whole act that I cooked up, guess becoming like a Renaissance Fair cast member, becoming a street performer, drowning all of my troubles in, I guess, fame, the limelight, um, barrels of ale. I literally don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I had all these insane ideas, and guess I'll see in this next year. I guess what becomes of them. Going back to the story. I guess ultimately, I guess how Mother's younger brother, how his I guess character arc finishes is he goes to Mexico. Um, right during like the Mexican Revolution. The war for Mexican independence, and ends up dying, getting I guess shot to death. I guess on the battlefield, and I guess just like I mean, I guess his whole thing, I guess the whole thing of maybe I myself, and maybe just the whole, I guess this whole like zeitgeist of our generation is, I guess, like you can have it all, and still yearn for something to believe in. I guess it never really matters how much money you make, or I guess how prestigious, your career path is. At the end of the day, without something you can really cling to, um, without something, you really believe you can invest yourself in, pour yourself out as a drink offering, and something that's going to outlive you. It's easy to just fall into the sense of, I guess, nihilism. And I guess like a year after I started to, um, I guess, kind of sift through this whole thing, this whole idea that, just because you might have, a career path, just because you might have, a plan, a retirement package, a pension plan, all of that jazz, a good credit score and savings and that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, the only thing keep holding a person back from just utter despair is something they can believe in. Okay? So I'm just going to close reading a bit. Uh, so how does this go? The campesinos of the South did not like either Mexico City or the revolution of the moderates. When they left, younger brother went with them. He had never revealed his special knowledge to the officers of the Villa, but to Emiliano Zapata he said, "I can make bombs and repair guns and rifles. I know how to blow things up." In the desert, a demonstration was given. Younger brother filled 4 dry gourds with the sand at his feet. He added pinches of black powder. He rolled corn silk into fuses. He lit the fuses and methodically threw a gourd to each of the 4 points of the compass. The explosions made holes in the desert 10 feet wide. Over the next year, younger brother left guerrilla raids on oil fields, smelters, and federal garrisons. He was respected by the Zapatistas, but was thought also to be reckless. On one of his bombing forays, his hearing was damaged. Eventually he grew deaf. He watched his explosions, but could not hear them. Spindly Mountain Railroad trestles crumpled silently into deep gorges. Tin-roofed factories collapsed in the white dust. We are not sure of the exact circumstances of his death, but it appears to have come in a skirmish with government troops near the Chinameca plantation in Morelos, same place where several years later Zapata himself was to be gunned down in ambush. Just gonna close with the words of E.L. Doctorow, and probably go to bed now. Bye.